Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of our program. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and today we have with us Dondi Scumaci, who is an international speaker, best-selling author, and mentoring thought leader. Welcome to the program, Dondi.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Hey, so give us a little bit of background on yourself. I know that when we say international speaker and mentoring thought leader, that's wonderful, but what are we speaking and thinking about, and what kind of industry focus do you spend your time researching?
You know, I am in love with the whole idea of mentoring, so I think that's sort of universal and organically through, the writing about career development and, finding your path and designing a life that really works for you, designing a path rather than following one. What has kind of organically fallen out of that is this whole concept of mentoring in the new workplace. And so a huge focus of mine is designing mentoring communities for the Fortune 50. And I would also say that's probably the most rewarding. So you have the elements of mentoring, you wrap community around that, and you just get to sit back and watch extraordinary things happen as people take the reins of their career.
Yeah, and I think mentoring is so huge, and you read these articles talking to people that want to succeed, and some of the advice is find a mentor. And, you're talking about it from the other side of the equation is actually mentoring people. So what do you find is maybe a good idea to connect, or even what do you find is some obstacles that people have with, find a mentor. That sounds all fine and good, but how am I supposed to find a mentor and then, to respect their time and to implement what I'm learning?
Such a great question, and I hear this one a lot because I think people who are being proactive in their lives and their careers value that idea of mentoring. But you're right, we don't always know, how do I find my mentor? Do you remember that children's story, Are You My Mother? Right? It's that little, I think it's a duck that's running around, has lost the mother and keeps walking up to all the other animals saying, "Are you my mother? Are you my mother?" And sometimes I think people have a vision of that in terms of looking for a mentor. Are you my mentor? Are you my mentor? And by the way, I am passionate about mentoring, but if someone walked up to me and said, "Will you mentor me?" I would probably be a bit taken back because that's a big, huge responsibility. But here's a little tip, and I think this is very actionable for all of us. It's take that challenge or that opportunity that's sitting in front of you, something that feels daunting or something that you've recognized as a barrier, and just do what I call a little bit of a test run with a mentor. Go to someone who you think may have some experience or some insight or a perspective that would be valuable, and you say, can I run this scenario by you? I would value your impressions. I would really value your recommendations on this. That is mentoring. It's hallway drive-by, real-time situational mentoring. And then sometimes what will grow out of that will be a relationship that continues on. So that's my best bit of advice for someone who's saying, I don't know who my mentors might be. I think we should all have one, and I also think we should look for opportunities to be a mentor, right? So when people approach us with those scenarios or those situations where they're troubled, that's a mentoring moment. So recognizing those mentoring moments, I think, is also a wise way to approach our relationships as well.
Yeah, and you brought up a couple points that made me think of some follow-up points, which is you definitely don't want to walk up and say, "Hi, I'm Mike, will you mentor me?" It's like, who are you again? Because, and even if you kind of knew someone vaguely, just kind of abruptly coming to that question is tough. So it made me think of the age-old concept of, someone is in a business meeting and saying, "Well, I don't like the way this works." Well, the boss says, "Well, then fix it." But don't come to me with a problem, come to me with the solution. Don't come to me with how much you don't like the way things are going. Come to me with, and because I don't like the way things are going, I wonder if this solution would work. So maybe, like to your point, you're going to see someone that you might have some, connection with in a mentoring capacity, and maybe you ask some really specific questions so that they realize that you aren't just coming to them with your hand out. And then I would suspect that you would recommend do what they say and show some action and show, if you want more, you better show some progress, because you can't just come with that feeling of entitlement.
Very good, because, mentors, there's a reward on the other side of it. It's wonderful to be a mentor, even situationally, and then to find out that the ideas were acted upon, there was follow-through, and then to have that person come back and say, here's what happened, and I thank you. Now I get my reward as a mentor. That's very satisfying. It's deeply rewarding. So, and you're right, off the relationship goes from there, because now I can trust you with my time and with my perspective. I know you're going to do something with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's just nothing worse than kind of rolling your eyes going, here comes this person again, just asking, and then you never see anything done. And at some point you're just going, why are we even having this conversation still? So it really is that concept of let's implement a little bit more, make 1% change and implement that, make another little bit of a change. So yeah, really good, super stuff. Here's a question. What are you seeing trend-wise in the workforce today? Because I would suspect that there's a lot of light being shined on the millennials, and how the workforce is changing. So what kind of trends, but mentalities and approaches to work are you seeing?
Such a great question. And part of my work is to look out there and really be watching for those trends as they start to hit the radar. We start to sense them, and you're right, the generational piece is huge, and it touches a lot of things. A great deal of my work, even through the mentoring and the writing or the blogging that I do, is talking about the millennials. And what I thought was really fascinating and truly it was one of those moments where I sat back in my chair and went, this is it. I had been asked by a large hospital network to develop some experiences around and some keynotes around the millennial generation, how to work well with them. And as I did the research, I was reading an article, and I believe it was from Forbes magazine. It was talking about this, what do these people want? These millennials, they want opportunity, they want, career, they want relationship. And the article was kind of making them out to be these, I want. And then there was a quote from a baby boomer who said, as I look at the list of the things that millennials want, I've always wanted those things too. I just didn't know that I could ask for them or expect them from my work. And I sat back and I thought, isn't it true? We're more alike than we're different in terms of what we want. Maybe how we ask for those things, maybe how we approach those needs. So I completely flipped that work over on its head, and really was how do we work across the generations? How do millennials come into the workforce and work well with people that are different ages than they are? How do they build that brand that's really vibrant and robust and successful? And then how does a boomer or a Gen Xer, right, or even someone who's more traditional in their approach and older, how do we demonstrate respect for the values and also lean into the strengths of the other generations? Some of the other trends are social media isn't going to just be a toy. It's going to be a tool for business. So organizations kind of getting on board with how do we make social media work for us. Another one is that change, of course, this won't surprise anyone, is going to continue at a crazy velocity. And it used to be that the skill set was, as long as you can respond to change and adapt, right, you're going to be okay. Now it's really going to be, sort of stepping up the game. It's going to be, can you recognize it before it's there, and can you be initiating, right, in lockstep with change, and even more than that, can you be a catalyst for change? So change is going to still be that, that big thing that's happening all of the time. Here's one that gets a little controversial, and sometimes my clients don't like to hear it, and I say it anyway. We're going to have to do something different about the whole performance review thing. It hasn't worked for a very long time, and waiting 1 year for feedback. The millennials, they're going to be, they are now the majority of the workforce now. They don't understand this whole idea of feedback coming once a year or once a quarter. They're used to hitting like, don't like.
Yeah, right.
So this whole performance review thing is going to have to be re-engineered. And I see some of my more progressive clients working through that, talking about what that needs to look like. And the other one that sometimes my clients say, please don't say this out loud, it's that whole idea of the employee satisfaction survey, right, where we do this big expensive survey, and then 6 months later we start to respond in some degree to it. Of course, the results are confidential, but we start to implement initiatives that may or may not be connected to the feedback that was given, and there's just a big missing piece there. So those are a few of the things that are Another one is that loyalty is going to shift. People used to be loyal to the brand of the organization that they work for, and that loyalty is shifting. I'm building my brand, right? So I'm loyal to the experiences that I'm going to have here. I'm building a brand, and it'll be more project based versus job description based.
Yeah, through that description, you just mentioned a couple times the word change. And I think that's interesting because we know the old saying, the only thing constant is change. Well, I wonder if a couple of the points you made would fall up underneath the concept of intrapreneurship. And that's a class and a concept that I teach at a university. I mean, it's an actual thing, right? I mean, it used to be like, oh, that's a good idea. You should be entrepreneurial within the confines of a corporation. Well, it's a thing. It's a class, and it's that mindset of you can almost, like you teach and say, change your position without changing your job. But how do you do that? Well, you act like you're the CEO, you not crossing lines, but you think in that mindset. And when you then bring ideas to management, whether you're a millennial or not, now they see you thinking through a different lens. And that kind of fresh approach makes you much more than just that, fill in the blanks, check off the checkbox, do it, and here's my timesheet.
I love that so much. That whole idea of being creative, intrapreneurship. I would love to take that class, by the way. It sounds fantastic. I was doing some research recently for a client, and we were working on the leadership, right, creating a leadership experience. And one of the things that I bumped into just naturally through the process was this whole idea of creative confidence. And as you look at, that process, it's like sometimes we think of creativity as being, those artsy people, and then you get to a place where you think, no, wait a second, we're all creative, and creativity has lots of different, voices to it. But if you saw yourself as creative and you started to push yourself out there a bit and look for better ways of doing things, look for, some of those new ideas, right, fresh ideas, and knowing that not every one of them will fly. But the point being, could you become more confident in your creative capabilities to do something new and fresh right from where you are? One of my favorite comments from a member of a mentoring community that I've worked with, she said, I joined the mentoring community. I was chosen to be mentored. And she said what the organization didn't know is even though I was a star performer, I was on my way out the door. I was looking for another job. I was very bored, unchallenged, and so I had my resume out to some other places, and then came along this mentoring opportunity, and of course I took advantage of it. And she said the thing I learned through mentoring was that I could grow in my role. And she said I started to sense those places where I could push myself out there, and my network was growing, and my perspective was broadening. And all of a sudden, I said, I'm doing it. I'm growing in my role. And then she said, magically, go figure, the promotion happened about 6 months later.
Isn't that just like the old phrase, I forget where it comes from, but, if you're dissatisfied with where you are, rather than striving and fighting against where you're at, bloom where you're planted.
Yeah.
And, the grass is always greener where you water it. So if you're watering and blooming where you're planted, now all of a sudden you kind of are able to weather where you are anyway. And, maybe that change or opportunity was coming around the corner. You just didn't see it. But now you're more, at peace with where you're at, and you're providing more value with where you're at right this moment. And maybe, you never know where that boss might have put in some good word, or some coworker or vendor sees a change, and maybe that word got around, your circles of influence, because now they're like, well, that person sure is, coming up with innovative ideas, and then maybe that gave you the leverage. But the bottom line is, man, provide value where you're at, bloom where you're planted, and I think that goes a long way, right?
It really does. You just said it beautifully. One of the things I wrote about in Design for Success, which was my first book, was this whole idea is that opportunity chases value. And so if we can just focus on driving more value, becoming more valuable, creating more value, we don't have to worry about opportunity. It's going to show up because that's the rule. Opportunity always chases value. Certainly sometimes it doesn't happen as quickly as we'd like or maybe right where we are, but I promise, opportunity is simply the result of the value that we drive.
Yeah, kind of like our good friend Bob Berg and the Go-Giver concept. It's,
the echo, right?
Yeah, your worth is a reflection of the value you provide, and it's that get your eyes off of yourself for the me with your hand out, giving me that tip or giving me that, I'm entitled to whatever. Just relax and do what you do and think about how you can give and serve. And I think that gets hard for people because it's like, wait a minute, that was my idea at work, and someone else is getting the credit for that. But probably the powers that be, they probably know who did what, when, and how, and you don't need to fight against that, because when it does come to light that you had that thing or that idea and you didn't fight against it, and they come back to you and they're like, how come you did, and now all of a sudden you shine.
It's a gracious way to live. And you're right, Bob Berg and the Go-Giver, it's just that whole idea, those 5 laws just kind of teach us how to navigate even the challenging things in a more graceful, gracious, and successful way. Absolutely.
Yeah, so let's move to another thought or concept, which is what you are recommending now, given this economy and this workforce that we're in. What are some strategies that you're recommending for success, in addition to what we've talked about with mentoring and whatnot?
I think that the network will be really important. So when I'm talking to folks and they say, what should I be working on? One of the questions I ask in return is, how will your network need to change for you to do one of two things, and maybe both, to fully occupy the space that you're in, to become a greater resource to the people that you serve? How will your network need to change? And then how will your network need to change to make you the natural choice for the opportunities that you seek? I even encourage people to sit down and find a creative way to illustrate your network. Maybe it's a tree, maybe it's a typical org chart, something like that. But really drawing it out, where are the relationships? Not just the names and the telephone numbers, right? I'm talking about where have you established and built relationship, where you have found a way to bring value, you have built relationship, and even you're not building a contact base here, you're building a knowledge base. So I think that good old networking, building relationships is going to be more and more and more important. I think it's always been true that it's not, it's people, right, that know of us and know about us and see our value and can tell our story. And I know that is true for me. Even in my own business, that's how you and I met, right?
Sure.
So the idea is, how does your network need to change? So that's one biggie. I also think that it's really, another thing that I talk to people about is learning to manage up. And that seems to be something that kind of resonates with people as I'm talking to people, regardless of where they are within an organization. How are you managing up? How are you becoming a better partner to the people who lead you? And how are you adding value to that process? How are you making it easy for them to do business with you? How are you making it easy for them to decide? How are you blending, to their style? In other words, are you bringing them what they need? And then the third one, what I would suggest, which is really hard for people, not a new idea, it's been around forever, but I think it continues to be really important. You have to find a way to tell your story. You have to find a way to tell your story so that you can build your brand in a very intentional way.
It's really interesting you mentioned those two things, because I think that, everyone thinks of, build your network. Oh, yeah, I've got 5 gillion friends on Facebook and LinkedIn contacts. And that's different than deepening and providing value to your network, because there's a word in that word that people ignore: work, right? They think it's networking, will you give me some business? It's network, right?
That's good.
Maybe I should trademark that one because that just came to me. But anyway, it really is the effort you put in, the value you build, and listening for, and I have found myself, and I'm sure Judy Robinette and her book on power networking, and I have found myself listening for people that they would be good to be introduced to this person, or you mentioned you needed this, here's something that I just saw recently, and just popping those quick little emails over, or in social media, maybe it is that you do a direct message on Twitter. So that's how you can use some of those tools to deepen that network, because you've listened and paid attention, right? You
become the connector. And, back to Bob Berg, my dear friend, he is a brilliant connector of people. That's what it's just natural to him. Oh, you need to meet this person. Oh, I'd like to. I just had, a beautiful cup of coffee a few weeks ago with someone that in San Antonio who lives here, and he had introduced us. All the way from Florida, he had connected us, and so we drove down the street and had a lovely time. And I just smiled because there is so much value in that, and that conversation emboldened me. It inspired me. It energized me. I found great value in it. So I agree with you. It's what value can you bring to the relationship?
Yeah, and not take from it, because maybe that comes down the road, but it's not something where you're keeping score.
Exactly. Very good.
Well, of course, I think we can talk for about another 12 to 14 hours, so we probably better land the plane. And what's the best way that people can learn more about your speaking, your thought leadership? What's the best way that they can access your resources?
It's always my name. It's Dondi, Dondi, Scumaci, Scumaci. Website is dondiscumaci.com. On all the social media platforms, it's Dondi Scumaci. And on Amazon, you can find all of the books under Dondi Scumaci, too.
Awesome. Well, Dondi, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure getting to know you.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.